Most Harry Potter fans can name the big Death Eaters. The Bellatrixes, the Snapes, that prissy little blonde one that Hermione punched out. But the full roster? Even diehard Potterheads usually miss half of them. From spell inventors to the Ministry infiltrators, we're breaking down every single Death Eater, what they could do, how they fought, and what they actually brought to Voldemort's army. Severus Snape. Severus Snape is the Death Eater who breaks every pattern the others follow. Brilliant from childhood and emo to a fault, he arrived at Hogwarts already sullen and armed with hexes most students couldn't pronounce. His gift for the dark arts, potion making, and spell invention made him one of Voldemort's most valuable recruits. But Snape's real power lay in his creepy obsession with Lily Potter. Occlumency. The ability to hide his mind, including his crush on Harry's mom, from even the most skilled legilimens in history.
The power of occlumency will help shield you from access or influence.
That let him operate as a double agent in a war defined by paranoia. His limitation wasn't skill, but loyalty. Snape served Voldemort, Dumbledore, and his own private mission all at once, making him both indispensable and impossible to control. Bellatrix Lestrange. Bellatrix Lestrange was Voldemort's most fanatically devoted soldier. She was also a sadistic, bloodthirsty monster who enjoyed causing pain to the point where she could have been a dominatrix in a past life. Wait a sec. Bellatrix? Dominatrix? That J.K. Rowling sure is clever. I know you can't see the gesture I made with my hand when saying that, but rest assured, it was a naughty one. Born into a prestigious pureblood family, she mastered the dark arts with a level of intensity that bordered on religious devotion. Her dueling ability put her at the top of Voldemort's ranks. She killed Sirius Black, tortured countless victims, and excelled at the Cruciatus Curse. Bellatrix's strengths were her aggression, precision, and complete lack of fear. Her flaw, ironically, was the same thing that made her so dangerous: overconfidence. It left her reckless in duels and blind to risk, which ultimately allowed Molly Weasley, someone she dismissed, to strike the final blow. Antonin Dolohov. Antonin Dolohov was Voldemort's quiet powerhouse. Less famous than Bellatrix, but every bit as lethal in combat. A veteran of both wars, Dolohov specialized in brutal curses and swift, unforgiving dueling. In the Department of Ministries, he fought Harry, Hermione, and Neville simultaneously, even when silenced. He later injured Mad-Eye Moody and clashed evenly with Sirius Black, proving just how dangerous he truly was. Dolohov's contribution was simple: overwhelming force. He was the Death Eater Voldemort sent when he wanted someone hurt quickly and thoroughly. His weakness wasn't magical, it was tactical. Dolohov often acted alone, which made him powerful in duels, but vulnerable in coordinated battles. While being a lone wolf sounds cool in theory, when facing down a group of spell-slinging freedom fighters, it's always nice to have a little backup. Barty Crouch Jr. Barty Crouch Jr. represents the intellectual side of Voldemort's army. A Death Eater whose loyalty was matched only by his frightening competence. A prodigy from a strict household, Crouch Jr. embraced the dark arts early, and later helped torture the Longbottoms. His true showcase came during the Tri-Wizard tournament. He subdued Mad-Eye Moody, impersonated him flawlessly for an entire school year, manipulated the tournament structure, and engineered Voldemort's resurrection. Few Death Eaters pulled off plans this complex. His limitation? Obsession. Crouch Jr. was brilliant, but rigidly fixated on Voldemort's cause, which made him predictable once his cover cracked. Rodolphus Lestrange. Rodolphus Lestrange fought in both Wizarding Wars and ranked among Voldemort's most trusted enforcers. Born into a powerful pureblood family, he shared Bellatrix's ideological fervor, though not her notoriety. Rodolphus excelled in dark arts and martial magic, and his most infamous act, torturing the Longbottoms, cemented him as a top-tier Death Eater. He was a seasoned duelist with enough skill to survive intense battles, including the Seven Potters ambush. Yet, despite his power, Rodolphus lacked precision. He was aggressive, durable, and loyal, but not as technically refined as Voldemort's elite duelists. That imbalance kept him dangerous, but never dominant. Rabastan Lestrange. Rabastan Lestrange operated in the shadow of his older brother, but his magical ability made him a formidable Death Eater in his own right. Known for his proficiency with the Cruciatus Curse, Rabastan participated in every Death Eater's favorite pastime, torturing the Longbottoms, and fought in multiple major battles, including the Department of Mysteries and the Battle of Hogwarts. He was loyal, capable, and consistently present, qualities Voldemort valued. But Rabastan's personality worked against him. He was great at sticking to a set plan, but became a nervous Nelly whenever he was forced to go off script. Powerful when following orders, but less effective when it came to improvisation. Still, his reliability kept him firmly within Voldemort's inner circle. Corban Yaxley. Corban Yaxley was the Death Eater who blended political influence with raw magical force, and a name even George Lucas would throw out for being too silly. A combination that made him one of Voldemort's most strategically valuable, and unfortunately named, operatives. Also serving in both wars, Yaxley was ruthless, disciplined, and exceptionally skilled in the Imperious Curse, famously controlling pious thickness throughout Voldemort's takeover of the Ministry. His rise to head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement under the regime wasn't symbolic. He enforced Voldemort's policies with precision and vicious efficiency. Yaxley's limitation was overreach. His power came from structure and authority. Once the Ministry collapsed and battles turned chaotic, he struggled to dominate the field the way the dual-focused Death Eaters could. Augustus Rookwood. Augustus Rookwood was the man inside Voldemort. I meant to say Voldemort's inside man. The Death Eater who made infiltration possible. Working deep within the Department of Mysteries, he supplied the Dark Lord with intelligence far more valuable than brute force. His knowledge of magical research, prophecy archives, and ministry operations gave Voldemort strategic advantages few others could provide. In open combat, he wasn't just a bureaucrat with a wand. Rookwood dueled Kingsley Shacklebolt, held his own, and later confronted groups of fighters during the Battle of Hogwarts. His flaw was simply visibility. Once exposed, he lost the anonymity that made him dangerous, and his usefulness shifted from covert to confrontational, a role he was capable in, but not exceptional at. Thorfinn Rowle. Thorfinn Rowle was the Death Eater you sent when subtlety wasn't required. A large, intimidating duelist whose spellwork delivered blunt, destructive results. Though Thor is right there in his name, Rowle was more like the Wizarding World's version of the Hulk. His performance during key battles, including the Astronomy Tower, showed off his raw power. He held his ground against capable opponents, like Nymphadora Tonks, and nearly overwhelmed Remus Lupin before a missed killing curse took out a fellow Death Eater Gibbon instead. What's a little friendly fire between friends, am I right? Rowle's greatest strength was force. His greatest weakness was accuracy. He lacked tactical finesse, turning every duel into a high-risk display of magical muscle. Effective in chaos, unreliable in precision, but undeniably dangerous whenever Voldemort needed sheer destructive presence. Thorfinn, smash! Evan Rosier. Evan Rosier was one of Voldemort's most aggressive fighters during the First Wizarding War. A dark wizard whose reputation was built on ferocity and technical skill. Coming from a long-standing pureblood family, he embraced the Death Eater ideology early and fought Aurors relentlessly. His defining moment came when Alistair Moody attempted to capture him. Rosier resisted so fiercely that he blasted off part of Moody's nose before being killed. That single exchange speaks volumes. Rosier's downfall wasn't lack of ability. It was his unwillingness to retreat, even when outmatched. Mulciber Jr. Mulciber Jr. specialized in a type of magic most wizards fear even conceptually, the Imperious Curse. A childhood associate of Severus Snape and the Slytherin crowd, he had a reputation for cruelty long before joining Voldemort. According to Igor Karkaroff's testimony, Mulciber's talent for the Imperious was exceptional. He could force victims into horrific actions with chilling precision. With just the flick of his wand, Mulciber could make you jump out of a fourth-story window. Or worse, have you doing the cha-cha slide while dressed as a Teletubby. That made him invaluable in missions requiring manipulation rather than brute strength. Mulciber's limitation was narrow focus. While highly skilled in his specialty, he lacked the broader spell versatility of Voldemort's top duelists. Still, in psychological warfare and infiltration, few Death Eaters were more dangerous. Travers. Travers was a veteran Death Eater whose power came from a blend of skill, discipline, and unwavering ideology. Active in both Wizarding Wars, he demonstrated a high level of magical competence, particularly with lethal curses and advanced charms. His most infamous act, wiping out the entire McKinnon family, showed both capability and calculated ruthlessness. Travers also displayed specialized knowledge, including mastery of spells like the Human Presence Revealing Charm, as well as its less popular cousin, the Herman Presence Revealing Charm. It turns out there aren't that many Hermans in the Wizarding world going around trying to hide their presence. During the Second War, Travers helped lead missions, including the ambush at the Lovegood House. His weakness lay in rigidity. He was efficient, but predictable, following orders with little adaptability. Reliable in execution, limited in improvisation. Selwyn. Selwyn is one of the lesser discussed Death Eaters, but his involvement in high-risk missions shows he was far from ordinary. Active during the Second Wizarding War, he demonstrated sharp battlefield awareness and strong magical ability. Also adept in performing the Human Presence Revealing Charm. a spell requiring advanced perception and precision. This shouldn't be confused with the human presence revealing charm, which basically entails shaking gifts and listening for the telltale cries of a human. Sorry, I couldn't resist making another joke about such a silly-sounding spell. Selwyn was there at the Lovegood home and joined Death Eater units pursuing Harry during his escape from Privet Drive. His contributions suggest someone highly competent, trusted with dangerous frontline operations. His limitation is simply lack of recorded feats. Canon never gives him a defining moment, but his consistency across major engagements indicates a seasoned, reliable Dark Wizard. Jugson. Jugson is another combat-focused Death Eater who appears briefly, but meaningfully during the Department of Mysteries battle. When the Order of the Phoenix arrived, Jugson immediately made his presence known by attempting to crouch-tackle Harry with a binding curse, an attack precise enough that Hermione had to interrupt it with a well-timed jinx. He fought multiple Order members during that mission, proving himself capable against high-level opponents. Jugson's magical style leaned toward aggressive, fast-paced spellwork, the kind that overwhelms rather than outsmarts. His weakness was tunnel vision. Once committed to a target, he struggled to adapt, making him easy to counter by strategic duelists. Walden Macnair. Walden Macnair brought a disturbing level of professionalism to the dark arts. Officially, he worked at the Ministry as an executioner for the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures, a role that suited his lack of empathy a little too well. A psychopath that enjoys torturing animals? Wow, you don't say. As a Death Eater, Macnair was reliable, physically strong, and skilled in dueling, shown during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries and later at Hogwarts. Voldemort trusted him with diplomatic missions too, such as contacting the Giants, proving he wasn't just muscle. Macnair's main flaw was straightforwardness. He could fight and intimidate, but lacked the subtlety or creativity of Voldemort's higher-ranking followers. Alecto Carrow. Alecto Carrow was Voldemort's preferred tool for institutional corruption rather than battlefield dominance. When the Dark Lord seized Hogwarts, she became the Muggle Studies Professor, a position she used to turn classes into propaganda sessions about blood purity. In combat, Alecto was competent with the dark arts and quick to use unforgivables, but she was more effective as an enforcer than a frontline duelist. Her strength lay in cruelty backed by authority. In other words, a typical teacher. But her weakness was an over-reliance on intimidation. When confronted by skilled opponents, Alecto faltered. She excelled in structured systems where fear kept students compliant, but collapsed once that structure was disrupted. Amycus Carrow. Amycus Carrow served as Alecto's counterpart, taking charge of defense against the dark arts, or, more accurately, dark arts instruction, during Voldemort's control of Hogwarts. Amycus was more aggressive than his sister and quicker to cast curses at students, making him one of the regime's most visible symbols of cruelty. Although, to be fair, if I had to teach a bunch of magic-wielding teenagers, I'd probably curse at them too. His battlefield skills were adequate, but not elite. He relied heavily on authority, fear, and the willingness to punish, rather than out-duel. His biggest limitation was arrogance. Amycus assumed the school's power structure protected him, and when real resistance appeared, such as during the Battle of Hogwarts, he proved far less capable than Voldemort's top-ranking fighters. Lucius Malfoy. Lucius Malfoy ranks among the most politically influential Death Eaters.
Lucius Malfoy.
And likely the only one to ever give an elf a sock. Wealthy, well-connected, and impeccably positioned within the Ministry, Lucius provided Voldemort with resources, influence, and access long before open warfare began. He orchestrated key operations, including the diary plot intended to reopen the Chamber of Secrets. But Lucius's loyalty was brittle. After losing Voldemort's trust, and several Horcruxes, he became anxious, hesitant, and increasingly ineffective. His strength was strategy and manipulation. His weakness was fear, and being tricked into giving articles of clothing to fantasy creatures. Once Voldemort began punishing him, Lucius's usefulness collapsed almost immediately. Narcissa Malfoy. Narcissa Malfoy is an unusual case. Not a branded Death Eater, yet deeply embedded in Voldemort's circle. Her real power came from influence, social intelligence, and the ability to read danger faster than most of Voldemort's followers. Narcissa wasn't a frontline fighter, but she excelled at strategic decision-making and protecting her loved ones in a world built to destroy them. It was that strong devotion to her own flesh and blood that kept her from fully embracing Voldemort's cause. Much like Dominic Toretto, Narcissa was all about family. Although it's given that she was British, it's a good bet she didn't live her life a quarter mile at a time. Her defining moment, lying to Voldemort about Harry's death, arguably ended the war.
Dead.
While she lacked the magical aggression or dueling feats of true Death Eaters, Her political positioning and decisive betrayal shaped the conflict more than many fully initiated members. Her limitation was simple. Survival came before ideology. Draco Malfoy. Draco Malfoy entered Voldemort's ranks under coercion rather than ambition, making him one of the youngest and least prepared recruits. Despite this, Draco showed real talent, competence in occlumency, strong spellwork, and genuine cunning. His assignment to assassinate Dumbledore demonstrates Voldemort saw potential, or expendability. Draco engineered multiple infiltration attempts, including bringing Death Eaters into Hogwarts through the Vanishing Cabinet, which was a significant tactical success. His limitations were emotional and moral. Draco hesitated in lethal situations and lacked the psychological fortitude required of Voldemort's inner circle. Capable, clever, but ultimately unsuited to the level of brutality the Dark Lord demanded. He also had the most punchable face, as evidenced by the already mentioned pummeling he received at the hands of Hermione Granger during their 3rd year at Hogwarts. Peter Pettigrew. Peter Pettigrew is often dismissed as weak, but magically, he was far more capable than his reputation suggests. A talented animagus and skilled at complex charms, Pettigrew performed magic that many wizards, even loyal Death Eaters, couldn't. His contributions to Voldemort were enormous. He resurrected the Dark Lord, infiltrated the Order as a spy, and provided intelligence that caused multiple deaths. Yet Pettigrew's defining limitation was character, not skill. He was cowardly, emotionally fragile, and loyal only to fear. Voldemort valued his usefulness, not his strength. Pettigrew was proof that in a moment built on power, one traitor could be more devastating than a dozen duelists. There's a reason J.K., subtle as a sledgehammer Rowling, gave Pettigrew the ability to change into a rat, and it wasn't because he liked cheese. Regulus Black. Regulus Black was a Death Eater who realized, far too late, that he'd joined something far darker than pure blood pride. Raised in a family steeped in ideology, he entered Voldemort's service young and ambitious. But Regulus possessed something most Death Eaters lacked, a conscience sharp enough to recognize evil when he saw it. Regulus's Mitchell and Webb, "Are we the baddies?" moment came when he saw how badly Voldemort treated Kreacher. It was enough to make him turn against the Dark Lord and execute one of the most daring solo missions in the entire war, stealing a Horcrux. His magical ability was solid, but his strength was conviction. His limitation was isolation. Acting alone meant no one lived to tell his story until long after his death. Igor Karkaroff. Igor Karkaroff was a Death Eater who excelled in influence rather than combat. As headmaster of Durmstrang, he promoted dark arts culture long before the First Wizarding War ended. In Voldemort's service, Karkaroff was a recruiter and political asset, not a frontline duelist. When captured, his survival instinct overtook loyalty. He named names in exchange for freedom, exposing key operatives like Travers, Rookwood, and Mulciber. His greatest contribution was intelligence. His greatest flaw was the same decision that saved him. Voldemort never forgave betrayal, and once the Dark Lord rose again, Karkaroff's fate was sealed. He died running from an enemy he once served. Jeez. Maybe Rowling should have made Igor the rat instead of Peter Pettigrew. Gibbon. Gibbon is a lesser-known Death Eater, but his appearances show he was trusted with high-risk operations. He participated in the Battle of the Astronomy Tower and fought alongside elite fighters during the assault on Hogwarts. His spellwork was strong enough for frontline deployment, but his weakness became infamous. During the Seven Potters ambush, a killing curse meant for the enemy struck fellow Death Eater Thorfinn Rowle after Gibbon was hit mid-cast, causing catastrophic friendly fire. It wasn't magical incompetence, it was the chaos of battle, but it cemented his reputation as one of the more accident-prone members of Voldemort's forces. His role remained limited, but lethal. Nott Senior. Nott Senior was a long-standing pureblood supremacist and one of Voldemort's original followers during the First Wizarding War. Quiet, but highly competent, he specialized in traditional dark arts, rather than flashy dueling. His value to Voldemort came from his connections. The Nott family had deep ties to old wizarding bloodlines, making him politically useful and socially influential. Though not often seen on the front lines, he was present at the key Death Eater gatherings and carried enough trust to remain part of the group even after the Dark Lord's fall. His weakness was age and declining health. By the time of the Second War, Nott Senior was well into his 70s, limiting what the Bag of Bones could do in combat despite his ideological commitment. Theodore Nott. Theodore Nott is not technically branded as a Death Eater during the books, but he's explicitly the son of a confirmed one and closely aligned with that world. Exceptionally intelligent, skilled in potions and arithmancy, and noted for his sharp mind, Nott Jr. had the talent and the background to join Voldemort's forces had the war progressed differently. His inclusion here depends on scope. He wasn't a soldier, but he represented the next generation of pure blood ideology. His limitation was isolation. Unlike Draco, he lacked close allies, making him a brilliant observer rather than an active participant. Still, his potential for future involvement was significant. Crabbe Senior. Crabbe Senior was a veteran Death Eater and one of Voldemort's most reliable foot soldiers. A pure-blood loyalist, he served in both Wizarding Wars and participated in several major missions, including Ministry infiltration and the Battle of the Department of Ministries. His magical ability wasn't refined, but it was forceful, strong enough to make him an asset in group assaults and chaotic battlefield conditions. His greatest strength, much like a dog, was obedience. His greatest weakness was chewing up his master's slip. I mean, the very same obedience. Much like the aforementioned domesticated canine, Crabbe Senior lacked independence and struggled without direct leadership, making him effective only when paired with stronger commanders. Still, being the Death Eater version of a golden retriever earned him a place in Voldemort's core ranks. Goyle Senior. Goyle Senior was one of Voldemort's long-serving enforcers, a dependable, heavy-hitting Death Eater who operated best in group assaults rather than precision missions. The Tweedledee to Crabbe Senior's Tweedledum, Goyle Senior fought in both Wizarding Wars, frequently appearing at Voldemort's gatherings and major operations. His magic leaned toward brute force spellcasting, fast, aggressive curses rather than sophisticated dark arts. Goyle Senior was essentially what we call in the Muggle world hired muscle. Strong as a bull, but dumb as rocks. This made him useful in chaotic battles, but less effective against elite duelists. Goyle Senior's contribution was simple: physical presence, unquestioning loyalty, and the ability to overwhelm opponents through volume rather than finesse. His limitation was a lack of tactical awareness, which kept him firmly in the ranks rather than rising within them. Rosier Senior. Rosier Senior was part of Voldemort's first generation of Death Eaters, a group defined by ideological zeal and remarkable magical ability. Although he appears primarily in Pensieve Memories, his reputation is clear. He was a highly skilled dark wizard who fought Aurors during the early stages of Voldemort's rise. His death came during a confrontation with Mad-Eye Moody, indicating he was dangerous enough to require one of the Ministry's top duelists to take him down. Rosier Senior's strength was classic dark arts proficiency. His weakness was overconfidence, a trait shared by many pure-blood extremists. His legacy continued through the Rosier family's deep ties to Voldemort's movement. Wilkes. Wilkes was a first-generation Death Eater and a close associate of Severus Snape during the Hogwarts years. While not as heavily documented as others, his involvement in Voldemort's early campaigns places him among the more committed members of the original circle. Wilkes fought Aurors during the First War and was eventually killed in a Ministry confrontation, suggesting he possessed enough magical ability to pose a legitimate threat, though clearly not enough to survive one. His contribution was frontline combat and early ideological support, the kind of groundwork Voldemort relied on before gaining political traction. Wilkes' limitation was simple lack of notoriety. His death came before he could rise to greater prominence within the ranks. As with many single-name Death Eaters on this list, you're probably wondering if Wilkes was his first name or his last name, in which I can only respond, yes. Mulciber Senior. Mulciber Senior belonged to Voldemort's earliest circle, a group known for its ruthlessness long before the Death Eaters became a formal organization. Though less documented than his son, Mulciber Senior was identified by Igor Karkaroff as one of the Dark Lord's key operatives during the First Wizarding War. His magic leaned heavily toward violent, coercive spells, particularly the Imperius Curse, which seemed to run in the family. Like his son, Mulciber Senior could also have you jumping to your death with a mere wave of his wand. Given his age, however, it's extremely unlikely he would have commanded anyone to dance the cha-cha slide. The hustle, however, would definitely have been fair game. Mulciber Senior played a role in early recruitment and intimidation campaigns, helping Voldemort consolidate power among pureblood families. His weakness was limited adaptability. Once Aurora pressure increased, he struggled to evade capture, suggesting strong offensive skill but weaker defensive instincts. Avery Jr. Avery Jr. was a classic pureblood loyalist whose ambition far exceeded his competence. Active in both Wizarding Wars, he aligned himself with Voldemort early, participated in key missions, and later attempted to rejoin the Dark Lord after his return. However, Avery Jr.'s reputation suffered after he falsely claimed knowledge about the prophecy during Voldemort's rebirth ritual, a mistake that earned him one of the Dark Lord's more memorable punishments. At least I assume it was. J.K. Rowling never actually specifies what Avery's punishment was for screwing up the prophecy, but it must have been pretty bad, right? Voldemort's not the kind of guy to be like, hey, mistakes happen, my friend. Buy me a butterbeer next time we're at the Hogshead Inn and we're even. Anywho, Avery Jr.'s magical ability was respectable, but not exceptional. He functioned best in group operations, contributing through sheer consistency rather than standout feats. Avery's downfall was his eagerness to impress, which repeatedly exposed his unreliability. Avery Senior. Avery Senior was part of Voldemort's first generation of supporters and one of the earliest adopters of his ideology. While he appears mainly in backstory references, his involvement in the First Wizarding War establishes him as an influential figure in the movement's formation. Avery Senior possessed solid magical capability and deep pureblood connections, which Voldemort leveraged heavily during his rise. Like many old guard Death Eaters, Avery Senior specialized in intimidation, recruitment, and public coercion more than dueling. All robe and no wand, as it were. His primary limitation was time. He died before Voldemort reached the height of his power, leaving his legacy to be carried, less successfully, by his son. And that's the full roster of Voldemort's employees, interns, and part-time disasters. Somehow both overqualified and terrible at their jobs. Now, if you want to see the families who produced half these headaches, head to All 28 Sacred Pureblood Families in Harry Potter Explained in detail.